My name is Chris Mulhall, and I'm next on RecTech.
Welcome to RecTech, the podcast where recruiting and technology intersect. Each month, you'll hear from vendors shaping the recruiting world, along with recruiters who'll tell you how they use technology to hire talent. Now, here's your host, the mad scientist of online recruiting, Chris Russell.
All right, let's do this. Chris Russell here, Managing Director at RecTech Media, where I consult with employers and HR tech vendors on navigating the world of recruiting technology. We're going to talk today about just job descriptions, specifically why you need to revamp yours and make them more engaging. But first, RecTech Podcast is sponsored by Job Fairing. If your company is hosting a hiring event or job fair, post it for free at jobfairing.com. Job Fairing helps employers and event organizers to promote their career event to local candidates via the web and social media. Learn more at jobfairing.com. Today's guest is Chris Mulhall, VP of Talent Acquisition and Planning at Point Click Care. I'd like to introduce Chris from a recent article I saw on LinkedIn. Quote, how are you supposed to find the right candidate if they're not even going to consume a job description end to end or even get to the skills and qualifications section? He asked during his session at Talent Connect 2016. That's the challenge. How do we create more engaging content that a candidate will actually view? At Point Click Care, a software company, Chris and his team have come closer to solving this problem after realizing their boring traditional job descriptions were turning candidates away. From one Chris to another, welcome to RecTech.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Excellent. Well, glad to have you on the show. So, Chris, few employers recognize job descriptions for what they should be, which is really a marketing tool. And I'm so glad I discovered this article about you guys and what you're doing with yours. So, when did you come to realize that you had to change your job descriptions to focus on, becoming more of an advertisement that sells the job itself in the company?
Yeah, sure. So for us, our company, Point Click Care, we don't have that well-known employer brand. And so, we find that we have to be pretty scrappy with our candidate outreach, whether it be on LinkedIn through in-mails or just direct headhunting. And so what we're finding is, our company culture is really great. We're very innovative. We're really entrepreneurial. And we would send these messages out to candidates to say, oh, come check out our company. We're so cool. And the candidate says, oh, great. Okay, send me the job description. And then we'd send them this job description, which is long and bureaucratic and, lengthy paragraphs and 30 bullet points. And the candidate says, oh, that doesn't sound so innovative in the end, right? So there was a huge disconnect really between, how we were positioning ourselves in the market, which I think was accurate, versus what candidates were seeing on our job descriptions. And so really I think that was our aha moment to say, hey, we can do this better, right? We're not walking the walk here. Let's start at that initial outreach, which most often cases is the job description, and figure out ways to do it better.
Okay. So according to the article, you commissioned a study on the different formats, which are three of them. So a video, infographic, and a comic strip. What did those results tell you?
Yeah, so I'll start first with just the context of commissioning a research study on job descriptions. So we engaged a third party to conduct this study for us, and they reached out to 600 candidates, about 300 technical, 300 non-technical, with across the board on demographics. So between different age groups, education, gender, time in their current role, in the industries they were in, and we had them consume job descriptions in four different formats. So the three you mentioned there, so infographic job descriptions, a video job description, a more fun and casual kind of question and answer type format description with a comic strip included, and then the fourth version, which is your traditional, let's say, boring text-based job description.
Yeah. And were these your own candidates, Chris?
No, these were independent people who most often hadn't even heard of Point Click Care. So okay. There's no biases coming into it, completely objective. So they consumed our job descriptions in each of those different formats, and really we were trying to accomplish two things. I guess number one was, do certain types of job descriptions resonate with candidates more so than others? So depending on the field they're in, their age demographic, male or female, did they prefer one of those formats versus the other? And then number two was to kind of test my theory I mentioned earlier, which was, our candidates influence at least their perception of the company's culture based on the job description that they consumed. So, for example, if somebody consumes a really boring and bureaucratic job description, do they make inferences about the company also being very boring and bureaucratic? And so we wanted to see if that carried any weight there as well. So that was really our objective coming into the research study. Do you want me to go into any details on some of the findings that we got?
Yeah, so what are the big takeaways, would you say?
I guess if we look at, to answer that first point about the different job description formats and how they resonated from one candidate to the next, we found that for technical candidates, so those in an IT profession, whether it was male, female, in the broad buckets of 18 to 35 or 35 and above, all four of those groups preferred the more casual language, question and answer, comic strip type job description format, and I can dig on that in a little bit more detail later. But yeah, that form across the board was the most popular. For the non-tech candidates, interestingly enough, male, female, 18 to 35, and 35 and above, all those four groups preferred the video job description.
Okay.
And then we start to see more statistically significant data on the non-tech side for women and for those 35 and above, significantly preferred the video job description over all four different formats. So something to keep in mind for any diversity hiring initiatives. When we asked all candidates, both tech and non-tech, to stack rank those four formats, so again, the text-based, the infographic, the video, and the casual language, question and answer comic book one,
Mm-hmm.
all four groups or all four descriptions, the traditional text-based description was ranked as the least favorite for the tech candidates 34% of the time, and for the non-tech 35% of the time. And we found that really telling because, again, a stack ranked last 35% or 34% of the time, but it's the description that we probably use 99.9% of the time in our job descriptions, right? So there's a huge disconnect between what candidates want to see versus what we're always reverting to when it comes to job descriptions. So I'd say that's the first group of major themes that we saw coming out of the research study. The second one that we saw was, to my earlier question about, okay, does the content or the format really influence what the perception is of the company culture? And so for that, we had a pick list of about 15 different attributes that someone might associate with a company. So things like innovative, inspiring, bureaucratic, boring, right? And we had the candidates or the survey participants consume all four job description formats, and then provide some feedback from that pick list to say, based on that job description that you just consumed, how would you describe the company that posted it, right? And what we found for the tech candidates is when they looked at the comic strip and the video, they used terms or they selected terms like innovative and adaptive, inspiring, flexible. And then when it came to the traditional text-based description, keywords that came out were boring, bureaucratic, things like that. Mm-hmm. And on the non-tech side, very similar as well. They really gravitated towards the video again, and almost half of candidates selected innovative as being, a top word that they would associate with the company that's using these types of descriptions. And again, very high levels of bureaucracy and boringness when it comes to what the company was probably like. So we certainly saw some assumptions being made based on the types of job description formats that the folks consumed.
Okay. I watched the video about for the Java developer ones. I love the sort of kind of casualness of it. I think the first 30 seconds or so, it was, just you were interviewing the people about the company, but it was more of the sort of off-the-cuff remarks and funny moments while videoing. So, it wasn't scripted, I thought, and it came off as very genuine. Was that a very specific thing you wanted to convey?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that. That's really the authenticity, right? We wanted our engineering organization to be shown as being innovative, and it's hard to be innovative unless you're willing to make mistakes and try different things. And so I think that first 30 seconds just shows some humility, which we value as well. Not being afraid to say I screwed up and putting it out there, and also the willingness to take some chances and try things over again until you perfect it. So really, yeah, that's the tone with the video descriptions is, we want to give an authentic and realistic preview into the job. And so, later on in that video, we take the camera over to the work environment, and again, you see that all of our engineers sit at a big, long table, right beside another engineer.
Yes.
And that's not for everyone, right? And sometimes it's tough to articulate that in a job description, and let alone an interview where sometimes it's not discussed as well. So showing that up front is a great way for candidates to either, self-select out and say it's not for them and never apply, or they say, you know what, I can get behind that. I like that teamwork and collaboration, and they're going to click that apply button. So
I think you really went deep into the department too. You talked about all the different technologies you used, a little bit of what you're currently working on, and I thought it was pretty detailed too in terms of the information you got as for candidates. Yeah.
We talked about some of the technologies that we're using as well, because again, it is somewhat functions like a job description. So we want to see, want some specifics about the role as well, not just cool shots of the environment.
Can you tell us anything about the cost of creating this video? I mean, is it expensive? Is it cheap? I mean, I don't know if you could kind of give me some baseline here of what it costs.
Yeah, so we're very fortunate, I'll say, that we have an in-house videographer who was happy to partner with us on this initiative. So the cost, I mean, we cover the cost of a camera for the day and some equipment. It was just a couple $100.
Yep.
If someone were to look at outsourcing it because they don't have a videographer, again, you can probably get away with that half day or a day rate and just call around and get quotes as well, just for the editing. But it's one of the things we're experimenting right now is having basically no tech and basically having a hire manager function like they're carrying a GoPro, right, and just kind of walk them around and have the voice overlay. And so yeah, there's definitely some low tech options if you don't want to look at some of the editing pieces too.
Sure, definitely. Okay. And the infographic, first of all, tell people where you created those. I think you used an online tool. And then secondly, I guess it didn't work well with some of the respondents, right? Let's talk about that too.
Exactly, yeah. So we use a tool called piktochart. An annual license is it's about $500, and you get access to a whole bunch of different templates that you can use, or you can create your own from scratch. And essentially, we went into this with creating infographic job descriptions with the thought process that we could probably articulate information in the infographics better than we could through a traditional text-based description. You could show visuals such as the typical career path, both upward and lateral mobility. We could show some cool graphs on the industry growth that we're in, which is long-term care software. And just with the aging population, it's great for sales roles that they could see they could be selling into a really fast-paced and growing market. So again, things that we felt like would be better through visuals than through a traditional bullet point on a resume. To your point about how it resonated with candidates. So infographics was one of the formats that we had candidates provide feedback on, and as fun as it is to make them, if you have the creative juices, they didn't score as well. In particular, with non-tech based candidates, the feedback that we got was that candidates sometimes saw these almost more as advertisements than they did actual job descriptions, and felt like they were trying to be sold something, almost like a marketing document. So there was, hey, does this company have an ulterior motive here? This is pretty slick. And so I think it just got the guard up of a few candidates for them to say, you know what, it's a little too smooth for me. Let's go back to the tried and true text-based description. So for some groups it fared better with. So the tech candidates preferred it more so than the non-tech candidates, but overall it didn't fare as well, especially when compared to both the video and the casual language one.
And on that one, it looks like you're using some Dilbert strips as sort of the head lead in this Java development team I'm looking at right now. And the questions, listeners, I'll just kind of read you some of those. Yeah, so it starts out with the Dilbert comic. It goes into, I've never heard of Point Click Care. What do you do? And you can talk about that. So what does a development team lead at Point Click do? You talk about that. What does a typical day look like for a development team lead? You get 4 or 5 bullet points there. What does potential growth look like? What qualifications do you look for? And finally, how do I apply? So those are kind of the questions that are based in the job description itself. I like that, Chris, because they really just, it's a lot more interesting to read than just, like you said, a boring old job description that's full of, I saw somebody on Facebook recently complain they just read a job description with 23 different bullet points all in a row. So, and, he said that he wanted to go to sleep after that. So it's a Q&A format like this, I think, is a great way to describe a job listing, no matter what kind of job it is overall, I think, right?
Yeah, totally. I agree. I feel for that person for sure. Yeah, so we still need a better name for this. We kind of call it the one with the comic strip, just because it's easier to remember. Yeah. So it kind of starts with the comic strip up at the top, and it doesn't have to be. It's just something that we've used, not all the time in some formats. And again, it's just we use it as a hook, right? So it could be a Dilbert comic strip, which we pay for because we don't want to get sued. So sure. So we'll pay to license the comic strip from Dilbert, which is about $30 or $40. Okay. And we'll create our own if we don't want to pay the money using a website called Pixton, which is a pretty fun and intuitive tool as well. So either way, we can put that in there, and you can just save it as a JPEG if your ATS supports JPEGs to be embedded in your descriptions. And from there, then we transition to, as you said, kind of more casual language, question and answer type format. These are typical questions that the candidates have about the job, and we position, all the essential skills and qualifications are in there as well, but it's just more of a relaxed language rather than long paragraphs and lengthy bullet points, things like that. So it's fared really well with candidates. I think they appreciate the more casual tone. Again, because descriptions get scraped and aggregated off different job boards, these translate well to different websites too that might not necessarily support a visual, but instead at least the text is getting picked up to different job boards. So. Sure. So we found it really valuable and really versatile as far as different job description formats, and that's resonated really well with candidates. And
we'll link to all these tools in the show notes. So, Chris, how long have these postings been out now? What kind of feedback you're getting from candidates? Tell us more about the results you're getting.
Yeah, the results have been really well. So we've been doing this for about a year now. So I think we have a pretty large sample size to look at, pre and using the boring descriptions versus post, where, again, we still have some of these boring descriptions, but we've sprinkled in some versatility here as well. And looking at the results, I think there's probably three common themes that I would pull out of it. The first is that we've certainly seen a reduction in our new hire attrition. And what I attribute that to is just more authenticity and more of a realistic job preview within our job description. So I mentioned earlier about the video and how, you can see, the work environment and where you'll be seated. And it allows candidates to opt out and just never apply, right? Mm-hmm. Rather than up and 2 weeks into the job they go, I wish I knew I was sitting at this giant table with somebody's elbows right up against mine. I would have never applied, right? And so we just look for all opportunities to be more authentic and more transparent in the description process. And in turn, I think that transparency is related to a direct reduction in our new hire attrition. So I think that's been one key result. Another result that we're seeing is there's certainly more shareable content on different social media channels. So you take the typical employee that maybe isn't as active on LinkedIn as you and I are. Mm-hmm. They see a funny comic strip or a cool job description format or a link to a job description video, and they're far more likely to like or to share than they would, a boring text-based description, right? Because who actually reads those when they're shared on social channels, right? So because of that, we're seeing, the regular employee that has a LinkedIn profile and a decent network sharing content that they typically wouldn't share in the past. And so it's got that longer shelf life to our postings. And that really leads into my third point, which is we're seeing a significant increase in the amount of passive candidates. So because our content is more shareable and has a longer shelf life, and we have engineers sharing their own job descriptions because they're fun, mm-hmm. right? We're seeing candidates reach out to us directly to say, hey, I'm not on the market right now, but your video job description came up in my feed today. I thought that was pretty cool and would love to know more about the opportunity. So it's been a great way to really expand the reach of our job postings as well.
Nice. So you think overall it will help to increase applications across other companies?
Yeah, I think both applications and the quality of the applications, because one thing we try to make clear on all of our job description formats is that point-click care is not for everyone, and that's okay, right? We talk about how it's fast-paced, there's a lot of ambiguity, high growth, and that's not for everyone. And so if we can be more tailored with their descriptions as well, and not just have them far-reaching with a wide net, I think the more targeted approach has been successful for us to ensure that the quality of candidates has been increased as well.
Right. And Chris, will you be able to share some of the results with me so I can share them with our audience at all in terms of some of the data you got from that research study?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to do that.
Awesome. And I guess final question, Chris, what advice do you have for other employers who want to sort of revamp their descriptions? What kind of tips can you give them?
So I'd say first, when we chatted about this before with different folks, there's always some apprehension from a change management perspective, and I think the best advice I can give is that it's really an easy sell with the managers. I mean, they all want better candidates, and they all want to find the right cultural fit. So I'd encourage you to engage your managers in this process, your hiring managers. Ask for their opinions on the format. Figure out what might resonate with them if they were candidates. And it's tough to kind of shoulder this on your own. I think the more information you can get, the more data points, the more feedback from people that might consume it, I think it's helpful. So we do the same thing with candidates as well. Get real-time feedback. What do they think of the job description? Did it influence them in any way? Same with our new hires as well. We want to get that feedback. So I think it's important to get some feedback from the different stakeholders, whether they be managers or candidates. The other feedback I have as well is, we don't do this across the board with every description, whether it just be from a bandwidth or capacity perspective. We still have quite a few traditional text-based job descriptions as well. We're gradually moving things over as we convert to a new ATS in the near future. Mm-hmm. But what we try and do is apply the 80-20 principle, right? We look at the positions that get the most hits. We'll use it for pipeline recs or feeder recs because we know that those typically have a longer shelf life. So I'd give that advice to the audience as well. Is if you don't have the time to overhaul all your job descriptions, start small. Take a look at a few of those pipeline or feeder recs or those higher volume recs. They have a longer shelf life, especially if you're sharing them on social channels, right? Nobody wants to click onto a dead link. Those perpetual pipeline recs are good candidates for video job descriptions as well. And especially if you're going to pay to hire a videographer for your video job description, you might as well get a better ROI out of it and link to a position that will be posted for many months rather than just a couple of weeks.
Nice. Well, Chris Mulhall from Point Click Care, thank you very much for joining me today. How can people connect with you and see these jobs online?
Yeah, no, thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. The best way to reach out to me or connect with me is through LinkedIn. Send me an invite and connect. And if anyone has specific questions outside of your show notes, I'm happy to discuss them with them. We start with LinkedIn and go from there. Really appreciate it, Chris. We'll link to everything in the show notes. And you're definitely one of my new recruiting heroes, Chris. I love the fact that you went out and did your own study. I mean, I've never heard of an employer doing that sort of stuff. So kudos to you and kudos to your team there. No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, Chris. That will do for this edition of the RecTech Podcast. Thanks again to our sponsor. Remember to check out jobfairing.com for promoting your hiring events. Follow me on Twitter at Chris Russell or visit rectechmedia.com. You can find the audio and links for this show on our blog. Subscribe via iTunes, Google Play, or SoundCloud. Thanks for listening.